Well, hello and welcome to today's Rock Reflection. Now, we are on a journey of waiting and of anticipation as we walk through Advent towards Christmas. And if you're anything like me, you'll not find journeying very easy. I want to get from A to E without having to go through B, C, and D. And yet it is so often in the distance travelled that we learn the most. And so it is with Advent. We want the presents and the turkey dinner, or the veggie option, of course, and the Jesus is making everything okay bit, that we maybe sometimes lose sight of the richness of what we can learn in the waiting and in the wilderness times along the way. Can I encourage us all, and I very much include myself in this, to use this season of Advent to deepen our apprenticeship to Jesus, to explore again the incredible upside down beauty and hope that the Christmas story offers, and to let it shape us. Remember, the nativity story is not a story about fluffy animals and a cute baby in a manger, but rather it is a story of hardship, messiness and chaos, and a king, the light of the world, Jesus, stepping and shining right down in the midst of it, for us, for you, for me, for our communities, for the world. And it is this concept of light that I just want to spend a moment dwelling on. If you've ever read the Old Testament in any detail, you will see woven throughout it a grand story of God rescuing his chosen people, usually from their self-made mess. This story of hope from adversity, restoration from brokenness, good beating evil, light overcoming darkness, is a story we find right in the beginning, at the start of time in the creation story, as Creator God tames the darkness that hovered over the earth by creating light, which he describes as good, and which continues on right up to now, where we find it in the storylines of our films, of our Netflix series, of our books. There is something about light and what it represents and does that we're naturally drawn to. Now, I don't know if the prophet Isaiah in the Old Testament fully understood the relevance and enormity of his prophecies and what they meant, not only for the people of Israel at the time, all those in first century Jerusalem and beyond, but also for us today. And yet his words revealed both what the coming Messiah, Emmanuel, was like, as well as the implications for the world of what he came to do. In Isaiah 9 verse 2 we read the following words: "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness a light has dawned." Throughout the history of God's people, there have been great periods of wandering, of living under the consequences of their sin, under oppression, in chaos, under attack. Times of darkness, of separation, of questioning and doubt. Maybe our own journeys have felt like this, or even feel like this right now in this moment today. And yet, there comes this moment when a great light dawned, a searing, bright light that illuminated and consumed the darkness. This great light was Jesus, the Son of God, born in squalor to a young peasant girl. In John 8, Jesus describes himself as the light of the world. And in doing so, he reveals something of who he is and something of what he has come to do. Now, light does a few things, doesn't it? Firstly, it reveals hidden things. It reveals hidden things. Secondly, it overcomes darkness. Thirdly, it guides the way and marks out a safe path. And fourthly, it gives life. Virtually all of creation needs light in order to sustain its life and health. And so it is with Jesus, the great light. He shows us, firstly, our sin and our mess, not in a critical, judgmental way, but in a loving, forgiving way. He helps us to see the root causes of our own darkness, not to make us feel worse about ourselves, but as the first step to freedom and healing. If we don't know what the root of the darkness and chaos in our lives is, then how can we find freedom from it? Secondly, Jesus then overcomes the darkness. The story of Christmas is the start of the final act of God's saving plan for humankind. A weak and vulnerable baby born into poverty who would later die on a cross, weak and vulnerable, before rising again and obliterating the grave and the power that darkness has over us forever. Thirdly, Jesus then guides us. He didn't just step into our mess and then just sit down with us there waiting for the end of time. No, he reaches out his hand and he walks alongside us to a new place. He lights a pathway that leads to forgiveness, that leads to hope, that leads away from idolatry and pain, and that ultimately leads us home. And fourthly, Jesus gives life. Jesus gives life. Jesus says in John 10:10, doesn't he? I have come to bring life in all its fullness. Why do so many people seem to think that being an apprentice of Jesus is this negative thing that restricts us from a fun, free, content life? Because this is the total opposite of what Jesus has come to do. He is all about life. He is all about colour and beauty and right desire and passion and texture and joy. That is not to say that anything goes, but it is to say that a life lived in the way that Jesus models is a good thing. As we head towards Christmas, off the back of a challenging year for many of us, who doesn't need to readjust their focus, to realign and find in the waiting of Advent this great light, Jesus? See, even a tiny little tea light can radically transform the darkness in a room. For some of us, the darkness and chaos we currently feel in our lives may seem insurmountable. And yet, even a tiny bit of Jesus transforms things. Let the truth of this hope sustain you. Your chaos is not too big for Jesus to overcome. My sin is not too big for Jesus to forgive. Our questions, our disappointments and messiness are not too big for the light of the world to lovingly walk with us through to the other side, where life awaits. Let the light of the world shine in your life today, and may he shine through you in the scattered places that we live and work, so that others may see him too. Jesus, we thank you that you have stepped into the darkness to reveal, reveal who we are in you, to reveal a new way, a new walk, a path forward, to reveal your love, to guide us, to free us, to give us hope, and to bring us life in all its fullness. We worship you, Jesus, light of the world. Amen.